Welcome to Hashtag Trending, the weekend edition. This week, OpenAI made a surprise announcement. They were going to provide an internet search facility. Now, there's been a lot of activity and talk about AI and search and the future of search in general. And this really focused the discussion, though, on perhaps the realization that AI was going to have a huge, potentially transformative impact on the internet itself and how we use the internet. A little history of search. I built one of the first websites in Canada, and there were only a few hundred in the world at the time. It was the early 1990s with a friend and someone I would go on to partner with in other ventures. Her name was Ayelet Barron. We were both working at Ernst & Young at the time and convinced our partners to give us a tiny budget. Ayelet and I learned quickly about HTML and how you'd build a website, and we found a small company that would work with us. That small company later went on to become part of Two Cows. We built the site, and then what? I mean, how would people find it? Fortunately, somebody did. Actually, I think it was one of the publications that became part of IT World. A good reason why you need Canadian IT publishing, another story. But somehow people found out about it, and the design was even copied. We won an award in the US, and that pretty much was that. Now, I'm going on a little bit of memory for this, but in those days, you found places by knowing about lists of sites. You'd know where to go and look for a list of sites that somebody had accumulated and put into HTML. One of the sites that started in January 1994 was run by Jerry Yang and David Philo, and it really took over. These were two electrical engineering graduate students at Stanford, and they created a site that a lot of us referred to. It was called Jerry and David's Guide to the World Wide Web. Creative even then. The site was a human-edited web directory categorizing links to various websites. In March 1994, they got a brilliant idea and renamed it as Yahoo, which supposedly was yet another hierarchical officious oracle, a stretch of the acronym, but I always thought it stood for Yahoo. I found it. This was at the same time as we were building our site, and the domain yahoo.com was officially registered on January 18th, 1995, and a company was incorporated on March 2nd, 1995. So this is 1995. Yahoo evolved from a directory into a comprehensive web portal, one of the first of its kind, and it started the automation of search, and it was pretty clunky then. The first search allowed you to just search through the manual list. And as a site owner, you had to actually go in there and update this or write to the site host and ask them to update the directory to tell them you existed. Even back then, pop culture was part of the emerging internet, and other attempts at searching sites were launched. Archie, another tortured acronym to give it the name after the popular cartoon character, would search for indexed FTP sites. Jughead, another search engine, looked for sites using the Gopher protocol. And there was even a version called Veronica, and again, it was an acronym for something, and they were all a real stretch. The point is that search was becoming more and more an automated function, although you had to know how to search. There wasn't page ranking or indexing like we have today. You had to know what type of site you were searching for. You were literally searching, trying to match words, and words that might come up in the URL or the title or the first characters on the site. And it wasn't long before people started to use these items to do what we would call web crawling. Lycos and Excite emerged, and they started this primitive indexing, even a natural language search, and they would crawl through the links. And it was still very clunky, but it was amazing. And Lycos had another innovation at the time. As much as we were talking about, how does the search engine work, they introduced advertising. Lycos had thousands of sites by this time. By 1998, it had attracted 500 advertisers and formed partnerships with companies like Netscape, that was really the dominant browser at the time. They attracted companies like Barnes & Noble, Microsoft, and others. And Yahoo and a host of others adopted this format, and we saw the birth of an economic model, not just for sites, but for search engines. There were two Stanford students, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who had been developing another search engine with the unlikely name Backrub in 1996. Backrub used backlinks to rank the relevance of websites. They officially came to market in September 1998 with this idea of an algorithmic search and the first rudiments of a search engine optimization idea. Over the decades, the search engine algorithm would become one of the most dominant, powerful, and even mysterious algorithms on the internet. It was like the secret ingredients in Coca-Cola or the recipe for Colonel Sanders fried chicken. It was part of the mystery and their brand. Now, over the years, Google kept innovating on this algorithm and became the most popular of the search engines. It used that dominance and that revenue to gain and maintain dominance because of the quality of the search. Others will tell you it's because of their anti-competitive behavior. The truth may be somewhere in between, but they dominated search. And Google does pay a variety of companies. Google pays billions a year to make sure its search engine is the default search engine for Apple products. So today, Google has a virtual monopoly with a 90% market share. It has 80% of the desktop market and 95% of the mobile market share. And they have a host of competitors that keep emerging. Most of these have tried to stir up privacy concerns, how much information Google started collecting on us and how they monetize that. There have been Opera, Brave, and recently DuckDuckGo. Others have tried, but mostly failed to even make a dent in Google's dominance. And even Microsoft, the company that killed the popular browser Netscape in the early 2000s, they made their browser the default in Windows. They had a taste of their own medicine. When they knocked Netscape out, Microsoft held a 95% market share for their browsers. Today, less than 6% globally. Their share of the search market with the Bing search engine has less than 4% of the global search marketplace. It's a virtual monopoly for Google. Since 2020, Google has started to attract a lot of attention about its market share from government regulators in particular. Google's now facing some antitrust suits, regulatory challenges in the US and Europe. But the real threat to Google might not be these little competitors or regulations. It might be something different. Artificial intelligence. Generative AI is going to transform search. And although there are other competitors using AI, the other shoe dropped last week when OpenAI, the upstart that stole leadership in AI from Google, also threatened to steal its leadership in search. And that's what we're going to talk about today. My guest, a friend of the show and past guest, Marcel Gagnier. Marcel, I have to say, I struggle to introduce you. A lot of people have one big thing that defines them. But as you said in our conversations, you've been knee deep in technology since the birth of the web. I've known you for open source information. You're a writer, journalist, and you're still a hands-on technologist in many ways. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back on the show. I think you should just say it. Marcel is one of those people who's easily distracted and can't stop himself from keeping up with what's happening because otherwise he'll just get bored.
What's the secret of my success? ADHD.
Exactly.
I'll find myself building something and go, you've got people that should be doing this, not you. Yeah.
It's just the fact that there's always so much really cool and interesting thing coming out of the technological marketplace. Honestly, I haven't lost that sense of wonder with what's happening. Because there's always something new, because there's always some development that is capable of not just capturing my attention, but the attention of a lot of people out there. I guess I just remain eternally fascinated with what's happening. And AI is my current obsession. Obviously, I come from a world of Linux and open source software, but this is the thing now, right?
The funny thing on this is, I don't know when it was, maybe it was 2016 or 2017. And I was pretty much knee deep in publishing. And I thought, technology, software as a service, is this going to make this boring? Boy, oh boy, I've never been bored. What's happening in AI has totally revived me. I don't know about you.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. In terms of what's happening in search today, the announcement from OpenAI was, if anything, expected. People went, oh my God, ChatGPT is coming out with this things called Search GPT. And let's be clear, very, very few people have access to Search GPT at the moment. It's the new thing, but only a handful of people, they're advanced beta testers or alpha testers, whatever you want to call them. You talked about the history of search engines and where they came along. You missed Alta Vista and Ask Jeeves, a couple of my old favorites from way back.
I had to take some of it out. There was just so much.
I've used every single one of these things over the years. In some ways, Ask Jeeves, I sort of think of that one as kind of the spiritual precursor of where we are today. The idea that I'm going to go out there and find you the information and bring it to you, as opposed to I'm going to point you to a whole bunch of places and let you find the information. That was kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah, two things with Ask Jeeves, and I think maybe I shouldn't have left it out of my intro. Not only did it start to serve you, but you had to be a bit of uh, it's like the early days of prompt engineering, that happened
Mm.
100 years ago, or was that 6 months? I can't remember. But where you've had to be very specific on your prompts. It was the same thing. People would teach you how to do a proper search. And then Ask Jeeves came along and said, just ask me a question. It wasn't perfect, but it was a really big move forward.
It absolutely. And I tend to think of that as the spiritual precursor. But the fact of the matter is, there are a ton of information out there on the internet. And I do want to touch on hallucinations in a moment because that's going to come into this conversation. I know it is. But the reason that people use search engines is because we're looking for something. We're looking for information, whatever that information happens to be. And the web has been built with this idea of knowledge must be free, information must be free. You've heard that expression.
Yep.
And there is tons and tons of stuff out there. And of course, increasingly, there is more information all the time. I forget what the numbers are, but let's call it 100 billion websites. And I'm sure that I'm underselling this by a huge factor here. With all of that different information, the idea of having a curated list of information of where you find stuff is pretty much over and done with. Like, unless
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going to the Globe and Mail or the CBC or the New York Times or something like that, you're going to have to go through a lot of information to get to what you need. And lately, advertising is making that more difficult, especially in Google. Google, in some ways, has brought this about because if you do a search on Google for almost anything, you're going to see like a whole bunch of sponsored links up at the top. And I don't know about you, but lately I just close it. It's like, no, I've got better ways to find information than this.
I'm wondering, a lot of people have actually been asking natural language questions of Google.
Mhm.
People have
Yes,
stopped being technical about it. I think it's like 40 to 60% of search are
as it should
questions
be.
that people,
Mhm.
which people type in. And it's pretty good at that. I said this to my wife. Why don't you use Perplexity? We'll talk about Perplexity, an AI
Mhm.
search engine. She said, Google's good enough. I type in a question, I get an answer. But the ads and how much comes up there that is pushed at you because they're making money doing it is a big thing. At first, the stuff where people could game the search engine algorithm and get
Mhm.
garbage to the top of the page, Google was always the policeman on that.
Mhm.
But now they're the problem.
We should probably not go down the SEO road because I don't I don't have exactly what you'd call the nicest picture of the SEO business. If you remember the early days of Google, try to sort of put your mind back in the early days of Google. You had a page of search results. Whether or not the search results were exactly what you were looking for is hardly the point. But there were these little ad blocks over on the right hand side. It was a clean interface. The ads did not interfere with the information that you were searching for. They weren't in your face. They weren't the first 10 links on a page that it shows you 10 links to start with. They were easy to look at if you wanted to find the information. They were also easy to ignore. And since then, that whole thing has been turned upside down. Now it's like, let's show you a whole bunch of ads first. And I think this is where the modern search engines, or sorry, the modern attempts at recreating the search have come from. What you're looking for is information. That's what you want. I mean, typically, when you are, I want to find out what sorts of things I can do this weekend in Waterloo or in Toronto or whatever. That's the information. You're not looking for like a whole host of other things, and you're not looking to spend a lot of time searching. I don't know about you, but in the past, I would open up like multiple tabs all over the place and you scribble down notes and then you keep the tabs open because now you're going to explore each and every single one of the links that were on that page. You have a whole bunch of relevant ones and then you skip through all of them. It takes a lot of time. We are in a world where we are inundated with information, not all of it good. And we only have so much time on our hands to consume all of that information because let's face it, I am not an AI.
You just nailed it on that. Two things. One is just the amount of garbage that you have to sort through on a search page. And then I've got all these tabs open and I'm trying to read all of these things. And now, we can get into what AI search does differently, but now, and I'm using Perplexity a lot. I just type it into Perplexity. I type my question in. It gives me a summary of the answers, gives me links to the places so I can actually go back and check it,
Mhm.
and a pretty intelligent answer. I've found my just from a productivity point of view, if I wanna do something, the it's an amazing difference. And it so Google created a threat to itself, I think, with its I'm gonna say greed. I don't maybe that's not the right word, but the amount of revenue they try and squeeze out of us on these pages, and really a format that just doesn't support the use case. Is that the real danger of AI, or is there more to AI search than that?
Okay, I think that there is a lot more to it than that. And I think that's what I was touching on with the idea. You're looking for something, you're looking for information. And the search model has been built on the idea, how can we make you pay for that information, the information that you're getting? And the reason that ChatGPT took the world out by storm, and let me get hallucinations out of the way right off the bat, because that's going to come up again. Hallucinations in large language models are a feature, not a bug. If you want the AI to regurgitate information exactly as it was put in, then that is exactly what it is. You might as well go and look at the page and read the page. Large language models filter through all that stuff and in human languages, return the information to you, summarize it for you so that you don't have to go through all these processes. Every once in a while, it makes mistake, but I don't know about you. I've noticed that the internet has an awful lot of errors to start with.
Oh,
So
wait a
search
minute.
engine,
That stuff on the internet is not right all the time?
no, it's not.
Yeah, no,
But
this is the thing. If you're not ready to sort out what's true from what's not, no,
if
no AI is gonna do it.
I mean, there have been many cases in the past where the very first link, the most relevant link, the one that Google's, magical backlinks, relevance page rank thing puts up at the top has information which is completely and utterly false because somebody figured out how to game the system and wanted you to see those pages. That is not any better than occasionally an LLM or an AI search engine giving you information that isn't 100% accurate. What the AI search engines are doing, which is interesting now, is they're returning information, but they're saying, this is where I found the information. So it's looking at a whole number of things. And if it's doing its job properly, it's going to pick up multiple ones and it's going to say, okay, this information comes from reputable sources. Here's where I found the information. In books, of course, we've had that for a gazillion years. And, you've got the little notes at the bottom where you can go and take a look in the back and find out where the information was pulled in from. We're effectively doing the same thing with AI search engines. Now, the reason that Search GPT made such a big splash is, first of all, it attacks the basic model of how we've done search for the last few years, which is I'm going to bring you a whole bunch of pages and you're going to pay for it by looking at a bunch of ads. And all of a sudden, this thing is saying, you know what? If you don't want to look at a bunch of ads, I'll just give you the information. Here it is. But the other reason that Search GPT is making a big splash, of course, is because it's open AI. They're hardly the first AI search engine to try to give you relevant information and provide you links and information and so forth. You've already mentioned Perplexity. You know that I use Perplexity. I have a Perplexity Pro account, and it has been doing this for a long time because Search GPT is not available to everyone at the moment. And mostly what you see of it is, and by the way, I'm getting tired of OpenAI showing us all these cool things and saying, well, maybe someday you'll get it.
Oh god, yeah. Sora, yeah, isn't it marvelous? Okay, we'll see you in October. But the announcement fever thing has always been part
Mhm,
of tech, and I think Microsoft made a fine art of it. One
mhm.
day, stuff is gonna be really great, and we're gonna tell you today because 'cause we're near an earnings call. But the time compression to release has gone down. You were talking about Perplexity's been around for a long time. How long it's been around? You know,
What, no, a year and 2 months or something like that.
which is like a decade in AI time. But I wanna go back to this hallucination thing piece and
Yes.
just nail this down because
Okay.
I've been writing a lot lately, and I'd love to hear your opinion. I think that a lot of the hallucinations were really good journalists jailbreaking things and making a little bit of spectacular thing in the early
Mhm.
days of AI. And that's what I mean. The early days of AI a year ago is a million years in technology. Like things have gone so much further. And in terms of accuracy, I use AI like every single day and a lot. And I haven't hit a hallucination since I tested out Google's notebook. Google, I stay away from a lot because I think it does tend to hallucinate. But OpenAI, Claude, Perplexity, what OpenAI, and others that I'm trying, I'm not experiencing the same level of hallucinations that I read about.
I steal a line from a guy named Ethan Mollick a lot lately. Ethan Mollick is a professor at Wharton, and he uses the expression, the AI you use today is the worst AI you will ever use. And I like that because it kind of says it all. It's like people are routinely saying like it makes these mistakes, therefore hell in a handbasket. And they've done that with Google's AI summaries, which of course yielded some weird stuff at the beginning, like you could put glue on pizza and so forth. But this was rolled out to the public. They know what the mistakes were, and then you can go in and fix those mistakes after the fact. When I first started using AI to do research, it was not uncommon for the AI to create a believable looking link to the article that it was quoting. And if you clicked on that link, it never existed. It was just, it made up a link and it made up a legitimate looking link. But that's something that I don't see anymore. And that was just a year ago. What is different about the way that it's returning information? I use AI all the time as a coworker, as in I bounce ideas off of it. I say, can you check this out for me? Where does it say this? Is this true? Is this not true? So I use it in my workflow constantly. And the results are getting better and better all the time. Now, people have built their own versions of Search GPT. And I did the same thing, actually.
I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes.
Sure, absolutely. Yes. Anyway, he has this almost a mania with him about the accuracy of news, whether you can believe one news source over another. Because as he likes to point out, even the New York Times or the CBC, the respected will create stories that are sometimes utterly false or so one-sided that you sit there and you go, is there any truth to this whatsoever other than the people that they're quoting in the article? Because news isn't always facts. News is reporting on what other people are saying. So they're not necessarily facts. And his obsession is news should be facts. Now, I personally disagree with that point of view because news is everything that's happening around you. And if there is a fire downtown, people are going to speculate about all sorts of reasons why the fire is happening. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong for people to speculate. Okay. At some point, the truth should come out. But that's the job of media and reporting over time. I know that COVID has had conspiracy theories, but we did not know what COVID was at the beginning. We didn't know how it was spread. There were all sorts of theories. Are masks a good idea? Are masks not a good idea? It's like all these things that we did not know, we figured out as time went on. And I personally believe that it is important for the media and for news organizations to release information like that. So I was explaining this to him that, first of all, I was disagreeing with his idea that it should all be facts. But I was also explaining, we can use AI to do this. And then that sent me down this rabbit hole along with him. He kept saying, well, you should do this. You should do this. So I created a whole variety of search engines where I said, here's a link, a URL to a news story. Tell me if it's true. But here's how I want you to tell me if it's true. I want you to go out and find, if at all possible, a minimum of 5 links that are unique, that aren't just pointers back to another story. So they're unique, relevant links. If you can find 5 that are unique and have their own point of views on it, that story is considered factual and you can give it an A. If you can only find 4, it's a B. If you can find 3, it's a C. I made it really simple. A, B, C, D, E. And F is 0. You can't find any links whatsoever. It's probably not true. And then I asked the AI a couple of additional questions. Is it considered a reputable news source? If it is, that boosts the possibility that maybe even with 3 links, it's probably still an A. And also, I want you to take a look at.
So you created this search engine on your own, more or less.
I did. So that was like the first sort of name that was come up with, which I thought was dreadful. Another one was Factate. In other words, help me, look up to see what the facts are for a particular story. But the point is, I started doing this a year ago, like over a year ago. And I made several incarnations of it. I made one using ChatGPT. I made one using Claude. I made a few using the product, which is, under the company Quora.com, which gives you access to a whole bunch of search engines. Mixed results because, of course, not all the AI systems have access to the internet, which makes it problematic. It has to be something that gives you real-time information. I guess what I'm saying with this is I don't have a lot of resources at my disposal. Mostly it's just me. I'm an independent consultant. And yet I was able to create a product like that using the AIs that are already out there on the internet.
But this is one of the things I talk about in AI is solve a real problem. And that's why I loved when you sent this over, it was just great because I solve the accuracy problem the same way I did it as a grade 10 student in my media studies course.
The
But
dinosaurs still ruled the earth.
yeah, and I learned to read 3 newspapers and compare the stories. And that is what I learned to do. Truth was somewhere in between that. And now I do the same thing. I curate the news. And one of the things that I talk about, like every day, I curate 3 to 4 stories. I put podcasts together and I do the same thing. I check multiple sources, knowing 2 things though, and this is something people have to know. There's precious little journalism in the world. When people killed IT World, and they did, a large American firm ran us over. When they killed that, they knocked out a whole set of people who were real journalists, who actually did stories.
Mhm.
This is happening over and over again. We have fewer and fewer tech journalists and fewer journalists. So most of what happens that you read is somebody publishes one story and somebody will break a story and then that'll appear in 6 other places. That's journalism in general
And
right
and they
now.
don't
But
and they don't even bother hiding it. They've actually got this story comes from, and they give you the
oh
source, and
yeah,
there you go. Like, oh, I could have gone to the original source rather than reading it from you.
if you watch this and you said reputable sources, there are
Mhm.
people out there who know their stuff and they're reading it and giving you their filter of it. And that's the
Right.
benefit you get from your search engine is I know that I'm going to check out, I know the people. And if they've read it, they're smart and they're good and they follow this stuff well. And if their BS meter is going to go off if something's wrong.
I actually thought my friend and I talked about this as a business opportunity, but every time I did a new iteration of this product, I found that the landscape was shifting under my feet. So I had to basically redo it every week. Now, things have sort of settled down, but since then, of course, the major players have come into it. And when Perplexity came on the scene, I thought, I'm basically spending a lot of time doing something that's already been done and done better than I can do it with my limited resources. You said we are going to talk about Perplexity. So let's talk about that for a second. Perplexity has built itself as an answer engine. That's the word that they like to use. And not only does it give you a list of links, but it shows you some pictures on the side, possibly a couple of YouTube videos that you can click on to take a look at. And the information is assembled basically almost as if you were asking somebody to do a research paper for you. Go out there, find me all the information on these things, tell me what you've discovered, write up something, bullet points, relative facts, show me some pictures of what it is that I'm looking at, because obviously we want some multimedia input. If somebody's done a couple of good videos on this, show me what the videos are. Don't make me look for that stuff. Just give it to me. Now, before Perplexity, even, however, there's a company out there called U.com. Have you ever heard of that one?
I've vaguely tell our audience about it because I'm sure they don't know.
Okay, U.com is actually, it's still a player out there. So, it's worth taking a look at. They will bring together a number of large language models, particularly the big ones, the big and important ones. And they created it as an answer engine before Perplexity even hit the scene. So some of this is a popularity contest. There are people who came before, just like Ask Jeeves came before, Search GPT, which again, isn't widely available yet. The future is already here. It just hasn't been widely distributed yet. The reason that we're talking about Search GPT is because they sent Google running scared. We haven't even mentioned Microsoft, which has got poor old Bing out there. Remember Bing relaunched Bing Search with Copilot, or actually it was Bing Chat, Bing with Bing Chat,
Yep.
which was really GPT-4 inside Bing search results. And if you wanted to, you could just click the little chat button. It's still there. It still exists. And in some ways, I have to admit, for a while there, I had abandoned Google for Bing, which sounds crazy, but I had
Sure.
done it because they made that available to me as an option. While Google, who basically introduced modern AI to the world, with their transformer models and so forth seem to just be lingering in the background, giving us the same old tired SEO garbage. You were going to say
But
something. I interrupted.
let's back up a bit on this. We've got AI that has changed search. One of the questions I think people would have is these models are trained up to a certain date. They're getting more recent. How does OpenAI suddenly become a model that can search the internet?
Well, the searching the internet isn't the problem. The problem is if you've got a base of information from the training data of the large language model, that's a good place to start. And that front end compute has already been done a long time ago when the model was trained, or however long ago it was that the model was trained. So now what you're doing is bringing in additional information to supplement what is already
Yeah.
in the model. And effectively, that's
Retrieval augmented generation.
thank you. For some reason, I couldn't pull the words out of the
It,
air. I keep promising myself that I'm going to do a couple of YouTube videos where it's like top 10 lists of acronyms and what they actually mean, just to sort of help people out. So what they do is they bring in that information using retrieval augmented generation. And they're saying, okay, this is the base information that you start with. You don't have to go and get that stuff all over again. You don't have to research it because you've got that already. And you can bring that stuff forward very, very quickly. You know, if you've ever typed anything in ChatGPT, it comes back like that. So now all I need to do is go get those links. I marry that with the information that I already have. I use the LLM magic that's in place, and then I bring you some updated information with that. So that's the change there. By the way, that was available fairly early on. It's just that it was considered a rather scary thing to introduce into the mix.
I bring this up because the mystery, if you think about Google's dominance, and this is, I think, the big story, is Google going to be able to maintain its dominance through this? I think that's a big part of the story. There was a search engine, and I cannot remember the name of it. I did a story on it, and they were going to do paid search and get rid of the ads. I asked the person, how can you match Google? He says, it's not as hard as it looks. What made Google successful was the algorithm that started to give you the trust in the information. That's really what made Google successful. It dominated because by going through and keeping ahead of SEO garbage that was coming in there.
Mhm.
Now Google is part of the garbage machine. All of these ads, all of this stuff, and once you lose trust in that algorithm, they've lost their value in the market. And so that I think is made a real weak point for Google.
The whole idea of crawling the internet. Okay, so let's address one of the other elephants in there. It's that this is all very expensive stuff. Google would typically historically crawl certain sites at different time frames. Like if your site did not change often, they might crawl you once a week or even once a month if it was more or less a static site. If it's something like a news site that changes rapidly or readily, it would change, it would crawl it every 36 hours, whatever it happens to be. And some sites even faster than that, depending on the relative importance of that site to the internet. And that's all part of that secret sauce that Google has going for it. But that's an inherent sort of deal between Google and all of the websites out there. Look, I'm going to crawl your site. I'm going to put a strain on your compute resources, but I'm going to do that for the benefit of directing people to your site, right? Now, what is happening with the AI search engines, and again, this is one of the other elephants, is that I am going to your site. I know that your site exists and I know that your site has information about these specifics, but I'm going to go to your site every single time somebody asks me a question. So all of a sudden now sites are getting hit sometimes thousands of times a day. Like in one of the sites reported that somebody's Fix-It site or something apparently got hit by Anthropic something like 1 million times in one day. For a lot of news sites and a lot of websites, is more important than the fact that they may be losing ad revenue to the search engines is the fact that the search engines are returning information and they're paying for that with their compute resources and
Yep.
slower access, perhaps.
I worry about the fact that we need sponsors. We have to have some revenue coming in. But if somebody can type into Perplexity or OpenAI or whatever out there, or something hand rolled search engine that people can put together, now they bypass my site. They don't see the ads.
Mm.
We have no revenue. And that's going to hit smaller publications really hard. It's going to hit big ones really hard as well. That's one piece that I think is going to be a big deal. And I just cringe when I look at everybody talks about the same things. And I'm sorry, the New York Times, wonderful rag, the Atlantic, I love all those sorts of things. But if you start to break up, particular, and I know the tech journalism world, you break up a dozen of those sites, there will be zero tech journalism.
Yes, I
And
agree.
that's where we get to. I mean, we're already in a position where there's almost nothing in Canada. I think I'm the last man standing and with a couple of other people who do other
Yeah.
aspects. Yeah, but it
Um,
but it is a tough world. So this could wipe out a lot of these sites, but now a lot of these sites where their content is what draws the people into a
mhm.
service, product, or whatever, they get wiped out. The economic model changes enormously.
And I think even the AI search engines are starting to, or, and I know we're calling them AI search engines, but we don't have a really good other word for it at the moment. I know Perplexity likes using answer engines, but they are starting to make deals with publications. Unfortunately, they're not making deals with little publications, but Reddit, for instance, just signed a deal with Google for a couple of years, 60 million. It's peanuts for something like Google. I mean, Google, they'll spit $60 million in an hour, but
Oh,
they're paying Reddit for access to the content. And Reddit, as a result, is blocking all other AI engines from scraping their site because now they have this exclusive deal with Google. Some of the places that threatened to sue various AI companies, I'm not saying they did, but there were threats of it, have made deals. Like, for instance, The Verge has, and I'm trying to remember who made deals with who, but I believe the Vox and The Atlantic have made deals with Anthropic, if I remember correctly. And OpenAI, of course, has made deals with other companies. There have been some large publishers as well that have made deals with AI companies so that they make all their works available to them for a source of relevant and up to date and high quality information as well. And that has raised a lot of eyebrows, of course, from people who have published books with these publishers who say, I have the rights to do whatever I want with your books and your articles. The AI companies who are spending a lot of money to bring these products to market understand that somebody somewhere has to make money, which is why they're starting to make these deals. Okay, for access to your material, I'm going to pay you X number of dollars a year. And obviously, we're talking into the millions here, possibly more. But they understand that they're not going to get that information if somebody doesn't get paid. And I think that we're starting to see a shift of that. But to address one point that you made just a little bit earlier, and I think that this is an important one, I started out by talking about information wants to be free. And then you talked about, would you be willing to pay for search if you didn't have to look for all the ads? I pay for YouTube Premium so that I don't see the ads at the beginning of my YouTube videos.
me too. I can't
So,
stand it.
yeah, so I am willing to put that money down so that I don't have to go through that. And I think that it's been happening for a long time, particularly with ads. And in some ways, I think ads were the greatest mistake of the internet, that we decided that this is how we were going to monetize all of this stuff. And there's no going back because everybody wants to think that this stuff is free, but I'm starting to feel like the free ride is over.
This is the question I have is $20 here, $20 there, $20 here. I'm no longer in the full time. I still work a full day, but I'm not at the peak of my earning capacity anymore.
Mhm.
And I've started to notice that I look at things and go, should I be spending that? And I think that happens to anybody anyway, because of the number of subscriptions, the number of $5
Yeah.
here, $10 there, $20 here, their whole products to manage this sort of stuff, that it takes a bite out of your after tax income. I wonder where the level is that people are going to say enough on the paid model. With Netflix, you're paying and getting ads, the worst of both worlds. Let's park this one because we can wrap the show up, but let's come back to this economic model piece because this
Yeah.
is people talk about the crash of AI. The crash of AI is going to be the economic model dissolving. That's what it's going to be. The tremendous cost that it takes to do this versus the amount of revenue you can get. And Microsoft's earnings call yesterday, Microsoft's not making more money than they used to, and they just shoveled out $10 billion or more into OpenAI. For those people who are old students of TV, Ricky Ricardo said it best. Lucy, got some splaining to do. You're going to have to explain how you spent $10 billion and didn't get a return. My biggest worry is not technical. It's not hallucinations. It's all that. It's whether the economic model can stand up. And search is the canary in the coal mine about this.
I agree with you, but let me throw one other thing out. I think one of the most brilliant things that OpenAI did when they released ChatGPT onto the world. And some people say that was a bad idea, like humans first coming out of the sea, as Douglas Adams put it. But what they did was they threw something out and they said, this is what we've been working on. All of our economic systems are broken to some degree, all of them, because we built the world on the idea that we must consume more all the time. You must consume more, you must spend more, you must show more, as opposed to you've got a viable business that brings in a steady supply of money and keeps food on the table for 100 families. And that's good enough. That's never good enough anymore. It always has to be bigger and better and faster and stronger than it was the year before. And I think what OpenAI did is it ripped that whole model open and showed us all of the dirty undersides of it, and is effectively forcing us to rethink all of these things, to rethink society, to rethink how we pay people, to rethink the value of work, to rethink the value of creative endeavors. It may seem like we've opened this terrible Pandora's box for all these things, but in some ways, I think they've done us a favor because we have to confront all this stuff. It's been building for such a long time. We started out talking about the kind of garbage that's come into search over the years. At the beginning, it was like really nice and clean and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, it just started going to hell. This is it. The Pandora's box has been opened and it's up to us to figure out how to put everything back together. It's going to be a weird and scary time, but I think it's going to be an amazingly positive thing if we can figure it out. We are going to come up with something that says we don't always have to make a whole hell of a lot more money than we made the year before. There are ways to create a sustainable system where everybody lives a decent life and gets access to decent information and provides for their families in a decent way. I mean, how many billionaires do we need? There's a hell of a lot of money out there. There's a hell of a lot of resources, and there's got to be a way to spread it out. I'm not trying to channel Marx here, but
No. This is a real issue. The economic revolution that has to happen with AI is a real thing. We're going to wrap it there, Marcel. This is the start of a discussion. And I'm talking to a lot of people, very
I'm so
serious people
sorry.
in Silicon Valley. The economic model has to change. That's another level. Hopefully, we've given you some insight into search. I know we've wandered a lot, but it is a big topic and we'll come back to it. Love to hear your questions from people in the audience on there. And I want to thank my guest, Marcel Gagnier. We hope to have you back. You're coming back. Don't even bother talking about not coming back. Thanks a lot, Marcel.
All right, pleasure. Until next time.
And thank you for spending part of your weekend with us in this, what I think was a rambling discussion. I'll find out in the edit. I think there's a lot of content. You can, of course, tell us, make suggestions, ask questions, or even add your own criticism of this, or suggest a guest or expert in an area we can cover. Let me know at editorial@technewsday.com. And if you want to see the video version, we're going to post that to YouTube. If you find it there, please subscribe. We're building up a new channel for hashtag trending. If you've subscribed in the past, please do it again. We're going to prepare for what is our own battle with some anti-competitive behavior coming out of the US. These large companies love to stomp on small publishers, and we're going to start our channel fresh. So please resubscribe and share this with your friends. We'll return on Tuesday morning with the news on hashtag trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a great long weekend.